Oh, the gathering storm of self-identity. This is the second of 3 10-minute deep dives on this infographic for January. To illustrate the gathering storm of self-identity, I have drawn some helix shapes capturing the expanding upward motion of personal growth. And you can easily draw this helix when you explain this part of emotional development for parents or teachers, or even to kids who are struggling. Development is uneven, yet always in motion in a kind of wobbly orbit around personal interests and abilities, opportunities, goals, and dreams. And if you remember the turmoil growing up, then you can understand why teens need extra sleep, are moody, sometimes harbor bad attitudes or big emotions, which can be hard for them to describe as feelings. That's the gathering storm. Self-identity work takes energy and effort. I picture the growth like mountain climbing to higher and higher plateaus in the landscape of life, where the terrain is new and can be tricky to navigate because, for example, suddenly any hint that I am immature, stupid, weird, or ugly is devastating. This happens because there are so many people inhabiting that new terrain. Most of them already know how to navigate the hills and valleys. They know the hidden rules and can find the well-trodden paths. Each new landscape has emotional rabbit holes because when exactly did I start noticing that my skin is a different color than your skin? Or gender became the dividing factor for choosing teams, choosing friends, or joining the dating scene. Or learning about sex forced a whole new lens on everyday life, right? Development gives many new lenses. We cannot unsee and unknow that new terrain. Self-identity formation is not on a neat and tidy schedule. Everyone has their own timeline, often dictated by the randomness of life itself. However, it's so true that this journey is easier when we are rooted in healthy and supportive family and community relationships to show us the way. What is rooted is easy to nourish. It just doesn't work to be told who we are supposed to be. So we each need parenting and leadership, which does not undermine our personal will to become ourselves. We're noticing sameness and differences, but defining our many unique aspects of our self-identity among intersections of age or gender or race. The Book of the Way recommends simple living and patience and compassion. Not to discover myself or find myself, but create my own self-identity. Emotional development. I love this topic because it applies directly to the development of self-identity. So do you have a sense of how development happens? Because the gathering storm of self-identity is truly set in motion by development. Development is climbing from one lower plateau of activity and learning to a higher plateau to cope with this new landscape. Development is about readiness. So there's no need to rush kids or worry that they're falling behind with emotional development. Nature has a plan. If adults are too impatient, they will battle a child or teen's reluctance. However, what we can do is provide an environment designed for giving kids space and time in activities which will lead their development. Developmental lead activities are defined by the 3rd generation of Russian scholars following Lev Vygotsky's work. In fact, from infants to elders, we create our own human development using lead activities. So yes, there is a zone of development like Vygotsky described, which I think about as a zone of readiness. Or it's also been called the Goldilocks zone. So for example, if the activity is too easy, then it won't be interesting enough for new learning. And if it's too hard, there will be reluctance to get engaged, to get started. The readiness zone is a zone of development, and it has to be just right. Then the senses are activated, the brain is interested, and emotions are available. And this is where adults come in. We design just right environments First, by removing chaos so the senses are not overwhelmed. Second, by keeping this child or teen curious and creative. And here's the secret sauce. We use our emotions to authentically and actively connect to this child. Everything about our face and our voice and our actions are inviting and welcoming the child or teen to join in. The adult task in the zone of development is to keep the readiness flowing and minimize reluctance. So this is how we use an authentic relationship to give the child time and space to feel their own energy, their own will, and their own self-agency to take part. So can you understand how foundational this is to growing a self-identity? Lead activities are always appropriate to the emotional capacity of a child or teen, not necessarily the chronological age, but more so the emotional age, because emotions, that is where we hook into the senses, the intellect, and the relationship, and they all come together. So did you know that when a child or teen appears to be emotionally immature in their cohort, this tells us to work backwards, basically repurposing lead activities, which are more characteristic of younger ages. So to explain this further, I want to tell you about 3 preschool lead activities. First, infants engage in emotional communication with their caregivers. Infants will actually serve their attention to a parent, like serving the ball in a tennis match, to get attention and responses in return. Serve and return is how infants sort out their senses and begin to scaffold pre-linguistic sounds, tones, pitch, pace, and volume of language. Development soaks in like a sponge. So it's ordinary magic. This is more than learning. Each lead activity is kind of a stable plateau in the gathering storm, giving that time and space for miraculous growth. And after sufficient growth comes readiness to pivot to the next lead activity. So the second activity for preschoolers is object-centered joint attention. This is where both child and adult are pointing at and noticing the same object because it's interesting. And this experience engages the senses and curiosity and emotions. Joint attention is face-to-face to continue using serve and return. But additionally, objects in nature or things like food, toys, songs, and stories are culturally significant. Kids embody culture. They use their whole body, and the super glue is emotions. And the third lead activity in preschool is socio-dramatic play. The urge to play is built into the emotional centers of the brain. And we know that social role play is crucial to express self-identity and explore life experiences. So kids will become moms and dads, doctors and nurses, cats and dogs to try on different identities. Role play includes serious themes like giving and receiving love, conflict, violence, abuse, but also this kind of play rehearses real life activities like sorting and tidying, gardening and building, or arguing and apologizing. A classic example of self-identity development is the role reversal of 2 sisters. Now, these girls actually are sisters in real life, but in play, they switch places, so the younger sister becomes the older sister. They inhabit the other's experience to look at themselves from a different point of view. Trying on the big sister role puts the younger one ahead of her development. She is acting like an older girl in a more mature, as a more mature person in this role. And this is true of all socio-dramatic play. Becoming the mother elevates the child to a more mature way of thinking and acting in the moment. So kids are actually functioning ahead of their current level of development. Watching kids in this kind of role play can be hilarious when they sound like an adult, but also it can be shocking when they act out violence, or embarrassing when they mimic our impatience. but always enlightening, because kids are authentically reflecting the leading edge of their growth. However, when kids lack readiness for socio-dramatic play, they will continue to throw the kid-sized pots and kid-sized spoons around the room. They'll be throwing them around or stomping on them instead of pretending to make soup. So don't rush. Remember to work backwards. Share interesting objects and show how they work. Tell stories and sing songs to maximize curiosity and creativity. Because guess what? Giving lots of time and space on one plateau improves sensory awareness. It improves emotion regulation. It improves authentic communication and stretches attention span. So likewise, working backwards with teens, and I'm talking about teens who are reluctant to be in relationships with adults, reluctant to communicate with adults. This calls for us to spend more time with serve and return, and to build trust and more time with face-to-face or side-by-side joint attention to objects of great interest, like, I don't know, microscopes, drones, music, makeup. It depends entirely on the teen's interests and aptitudes. This is vulnerable developmental territory for teens. So use objects of high interest and go slowly. Emotional development builds capacity for more emotional development. So it's definitely worth the time.